Hi, welcome to Feasting on Fanfare, Bento Aureo. When I was doing my first read-through of JoJo, I was just so tickled by how many different culinary references there were. Sure, there was Tonio's restaurant in part 4, and there were foods that popped up here and there in parts 3 and 2, but when I got to part 5, suddenly everybody was named after food. I just wanted to find out everything about all these different culinary influences. So what better place to start than with the leader of the Passione squad, Bucciarati. Now, these are named after the Buccellati cookies, also known as cuccidati, that hail from Sicily. They're a traditional Christmas cookie, and one look at their shape will immediately remind you of Buccellati's stand. They are packed with figs and dried fruit and nuts, and they are just so delicious. They take a little bit of work, but they are so worth the effort. So let's find out how they're made.
We'll start with the dough. First, we're going to take a softened stick of butter and 2 1/3 cup of all-purpose flour. We're going to also add about 2 tablespoons of sugar, 2 teaspoons of baking powder, and half a teaspoon of salt. Now, this dough is going to have to sit in the fridge for a while, so go ahead and do this well in advance. I usually do this a day or two before I'm actually going to make the cookies. If I find that I'm going to be very busy on baking day, I might go ahead and make the filling as well. Now, once the ingredients have started to get friendly, we can go ahead and add about an orange worth of orange zest. You can use lemon if you prefer, as well as 2 large eggs and 2 tablespoons of milk. Now, if you need to scrape down the bowl, go ahead and do that at any time. After that, it's just a matter of mixing until it comes together. This will take a few minutes. And it's not going to be especially smooth. We're looking for something that holds together, but it's still probably going to look pretty pebbly. So let's go ahead and give this the squeeze test. Clumpy, but it holds together. It molds pretty nicely. Yeah, that's about what we're looking for. Now at this point, we're going to have to hand work this. And this will take a few minutes of kneading as well. I'm afraid this is not a step that you can delegate to your mixer, but don't be afraid. Kneading is fine. Kneading's a good little stress-relieving workout. And we're just going to work that until it comes together into a nice cohesive ball or log or whatever shape you're just feeling like. Let this be your expression of dough lumps. But whatever shape you're feeling like, make sure that you get up all those little stray bits and bobs. It might not be enough to make a full cookie, but it just bothers me to be wasting good dough. Now once you're done with that, this just needs to go into a Ziploc bag or get covered in wrap and placed in the fridge for a minimum of 1 hour. But again, a couple days, that's perfectly fine. I even freeze this stuff, making it super convenient for whenever I have to make a lot of cookies for something. Now, while the dough is chilling, we can go ahead and make our fillings. We're starting off with about a cup each of roughly chopped apricots and roughly chopped figs that have had their stems removed. These guys are going into a food processor along with about a 1/4 cup of orange juice, freshly squeezed is great, about a 1/4 cup of some kind of booze. I like to use applejack, but rum or brandy is also great, as well as a teaspoon or 2 of cinnamon according to your own tastes, and about a 1/3 of a cup of honey. Don't want to consume alcohol. You do not have to include the booze component. I have made it without. I will do so again. It still turns out really great. However, my researchers have shown me that a little bit of something is traditional in these cookies, so for that sake, I'm going to do that. Besides, I don't know, I just like the decadence and the little sophistication that comes from a little spike in my treats. In either case, dry or spiked, we're going to pulse this until it comes to a nice, chunky, but semi-smooth texture. And while we're at it, let's just go ahead and give it a little tasty taste to see how we're liking it. And I am liking it, so let's go ahead and finish her up. I'm adding about 3/4 cups of pistachios at the very end and pulsing gently. Now we're doing this because we want this to stay chunky and not be ground down all the way into pistachio butter with fruit in it, which would be delicious, but it's not what we're going for. Next, we want to start shaping the cookies. We're going to break down our chilled dough into manageable pieces. Of course, if you've frozen the dough, you want to just let it thaw for a while in the fridge until it's workable. Now, it will not be the easiest thing to deal with fresh out of the fridge, but work it with your hands, knead it, roll it, let it come up to that sweet spot where it's not too loose and it's not too firm. At that point, we are going to roll these into roughly sheets about 1/8 of an inch thick and 3 to 4 inches wide. Now, it doesn't really matter how long these strips are. If you're working with larger chunks at a time or smaller, does not matter. We just want a nice uniform thickness and width. Now, if you find that your dough is cracking or splitting, you can kind of laminate the dough, fold it over itself, and continue to work it so that it smooths out a little bit. For this reason, that's also why I don't really flour the board. I don't want to work too much more flour into this because it's already got all it needs. But we just keep on working the dough as much as we need to until we get the dimensions and the texture that we're looking for. Now, if you want to trim off the sides so that it's a little bit more clear cut, that's perfectly fine. Sometimes I do that and sometimes I don't. It's totally up to you. Either way, we're going to fill these babies now, and we're doing that by making a sort of a strip running along the middle of that dough. You can do this by spoon, but I find that to get the most consistent width and shape, I like to just do it by hand. I find that the filling is a little bit more workable by hand if it's a little bit chilled. So if you made the dough and the filling the day before, that works out really well. However, it's going to be fine at room temperature. Don't worry, you don't have to go to any extra lengths. Now at this point, we're just going to make that sheet of dough into a tube. I like to kind of pinch it down, then roll it, then seal it once more with more pinching, and roll it again so that we get a fairly uniform sort of dough roll. After that, we are going to divide these down into lengths, after we double check and make sure our seal is good, of course. Now you can use a bench scraper, but I like to use a sharp knife to cut these down into about 2 to 3 inch long sections. Reseal the tubes if necessary, and start slicing kind of a zipper tooth pattern out of them. Personally, I would not be surprised if this was part of Araki's inspiration of making Buccellati into Buccellati. That, and if you do the filling by hand like I do, you're sure to get sticky fingers. Anyway, we're going to want to bake these in a 350-degree oven for about 25 minutes. Now, I use an icing technique, which is great for all kinds of cakes and cookies. You're going to love it. It's so easy. We start off with some icing sugar, confectioner's sugar, powdered sugar, whatever you want to call it, about maybe 2 cups worth, and then we slowly add liquid. In this case, I'm going to use lemon juice. Fresh squeeze is best, but bottled is what I had on hand. And we're going to whisk that up, adjusting as necessary until we get the consistency we want. Now, if you're not feeling like lemon and you want to go back to the orange theme, why don't we use some orange juice and some orange zest? That works really well too. Now that all of our players are assembled, we can go ahead and put these cookies all together. Just go ahead and dip your fully baked, lightly golden cookies into whichever icing you may have prepared, and then just let them dry. Now, if you have leftover dough or leftover filling, that will freeze just fine. This filling usually is enough for 2 batches of cookies, although you don't have to do that. I've used extra filling for strudels or other sorts of things. Trust me, you can find some good uses for it. Now, you do want to let these fully dry before you store them. Besides that, all the work is done. So why don't we go ahead and see how they taste?
Okay, let's see how these go. We have here my friends Brennan and Jim, and they're going to let us know how these are. So, gentlemen, if you will, have at it.
It's got quite a lot of fig taste, which I like a lot, because you get like fig Newtons or whatever, and it doesn't have, it just tastes like goo. You don't get a lot of flavor to it. So it's kind of nice that actually you get the fig flavor out of it.
There's also a tartness, which, again, with processed or store-bought equivalents, you don't often get.
think the frosting is really good. Is it like?
It's just confectioner's sugar, lemon or orange juice, depending on which one you're having,
Okay.
and a little bit of zest. Super simple.
The little bit of citrus makes brings it
Makes
up
a
just
difference.
a little bit. Yeah.
Are there nuts?
There's pistachios in it.
Pistachios.
But you can kind of play around with the fruits and nuts you have in there. Figs are traditional, but some kind of fruit alongside it, in this case apricots, and some kind of nut, in this case pistachios. There's versions with walnuts, hazelnuts, almonds, all kinds of things. I like this blend.
I always enjoy a dessert with apricot because it's so unusual in today's world. You don't really. It's not a popular fruit. It's not a popular food.
Yeah.
Something I enjoy.
But it's a nice little something special, and it's like with just a little bit of applejack. But you can use rum or whatever you like.
Homemade.
I do not have homemade applejack yet, but
We'll work on it.
yeah, it's on the list. It's on the list. All right, so thumbs up.
Very good.
Well, there you have it. Despite the work and the time, which really isn't all that bad, I suggest you give these a try. Now, again, go ahead and if you are trying it, mix up the fruits, mix up the nuts, try a few different spices if you like. Go out there and play with your food. Thank you.